Hi guys, and welcome to another episode of Kabir Considers. In this video, we're going to react to the Olympic bombing of 1996. So this was the Olympics in Atlanta, in America. I don't think there's been an Olympics in America since then, has there? There might have been, but I don't think so. And why? Why did he do it? Like, what was his motive? I just don't know why people, but then again, that's why I would never do something like this. But just why would you want to do, like, it's got to be to make a statement of some kind, to, I don't know, alert people to something. Because the guy who did the Oklahoma City bombing, Timothy McVeigh, I think he did it because in protest of what happened in Waco a few years earlier. So perhaps it was something like that.
We have had word now of an explosion.
A bombing at Atlanta's Summer Olympics.
Total chaos, mass pandemonium going on down here.
Led to a massive law enforcement investigation.
We will consider it an act of terrorism.
And soon set off a frenzy of speculation.
Who is the real Richard Jewell?
FBI officials believe he fits a profile of the type of person who might commit such an act, but concede they have no hard evidence against him.
Will you categorically say that you did not do this?
I did not do it.
Richard Jewell's nightmare was a cautionary tale.
It's hard to believe that it is really over.
But what lessons have law enforcement and the press really learned?
It is now clear that the shooter was not Ryan Lanza, it was his brother, Adam Lanza.
An earlier report that I had was incorrect, that he was connected with the Tea Party. In fact, that's a different Jim Holmes.
Some media outlets were tweeting out that the shooter was a man named Raleigh Chance.
When I leave the house, right now, I'm looking over my shoulder.
Man, it's got to be like horrible to be falsely accused of something like that. You know, because it's going to linger. It's going to take so long for that reputation to be repaired.
Welcome to Atlanta's Olympic Stadium for the opening ceremony of these Centennial Olympic Games.
That's a big explosion.
In the early morning of July 27th, 1996, more than 100 people were injured and one killed by a bomb blast at Atlanta's Centennial Olympic Park.
After the bombing had occurred, the victims were taken away. I remember very distinctly, as the light came up, I started meeting some of the people around in the area, and one of the people on the scene was Richard Jewell.
Jewell, a former sheriff's deputy, had discovered the bomb in a backpack and helped clear the area before the explosion. He was hailed a hero.
And I just hope that we catch the people that did it.
Following the bombing, there were a lot of suspects, but it wasn't too far into the investigation where Richard Jewell's name started surfacing.
The president of a college where Jewell had worked security called the FBI to say he had concerns about Jewell. A check into Jewell's background revealed other witnesses who reported he had a history of employment problems and was obsessed with law enforcement.
Our profilers.
But where's the connection? He had a lot of jobs and he had an interest in law enforcement. Where's the connection between that and wanting to bomb the Olympics? Seems like a reach.
Quantico, watching the shows and saying, we've had instances in the recent past where police officers invented situations so that they could be the heroes. He started to have that look about him. We've got the Olympic Games going on. We're concerned that whoever did it may do it again if we don't get hold of them.
It was a lot of pressure to resolve the case very quickly.
The assumption was that everyone would keep everything confidential because of the importance of the investigation. In hindsight, that was naive because people like to talk.
An unidentified law enforcement source leaked Jewell's name to Ron Martz's reporting partner, Kathy Scruggs.
It was important for us as the hometown paper to try to verify as soon as possible and put that information out on the street.
Word quickly reached investigators.
It sped up the timetable in the investigation.
And now they're going to start hounding him, you know. They're going to start digging into his trash, you know, probably going to his home, watching him. Like, innocent until proven guilty. Come on.
On what the investigators wanted to do to try to get to Richard Jewell before his name was all over creation. Law enforcement really wanted to talk with Richard Jewell, either to find out if he did it or to clear him.
We wanted to create an environment, if we brought him in for an interview, where he would be comfortable.
So when two agents went to talk to Jewell and he expressed concerns about being interviewed on videotape, they told him it would be used in a training film for first responders. He then agreed to come to Atlanta's FBI office.
I don't think they were very far into the interview when I received a phone call from the director. And the director said, I want you to stop the interview to warn him of his rights. Do it now. And so I instructed the assistant special agent in charge to knock on the door.
Wow, so that means that they think it's him. They thought it was him. I see.
Alexander later saw on videotape what happened next.
The investigation was going along as if it was a training video for a first responder. At a point, the investigators just said, we want to make this as realistic as possible, or something to that effect. We're even going to read you the Miranda rights. And as they start, the camera's on Richard Jewell, and his eyes widen a little bit, and it's like there's a cartoon character light bulb going off on top, and you realize he's saying, wait a minute, am I a suspect?
FBI has a suspect. Read all about it.
The news had already hit the streets when from inside the FBI office, Jewell called a friend who was a lawyer.
I asked him if he'd read the newspaper. He said no, he hadn't, so I read him the headline. And I said, man, they think you did it. Asked him if he was under arrest, and they said no, he was not. And I said, great, then he's leaving.
I remember saying to my editor, this man's life will never be the same, simply because he suddenly was in the eye of this media storm.
Man, if he, because he clearly to me seems innocent based on the title of this video. Whoever leaked his name to the newspaper, I would sue the hell out of him if I was Richard Jewell. They turned his life upside down. It's not fair. Like, come on.
Are they letting you go to work? They're letting you go to work. You're free to go. Did they tell you now not to leave town? No. Can you categorically
look at all the cameras in his face?
Categorically.
Just leave him alone.
Television cameras surrounded Jewell's apartment as federal agents searched for evidence.
It created a circus environment, I'm sure, anger with his attorney, but we had a responsibility to try to figure out whether he was involved.
Some of the coverage, while acknowledging that Jewell was only under investigation, still cast him in the worst possible light.
The hero may be a possible villain. You get a different picture of Richard Jewell in these North Georgia mountains.
Here we go. They're going to start using all the worst photos they can find. The one with him with the gun.
Alone in this rented home with his Doberman dogs, most days with the blinds drawn.
But behind the scenes, a few investigators had doubts.
I had one of my agents, and I believe an FBI agent, redo and watch the interviews in detail. And my agent came to me, and the first thing he said was, this guy didn't do it.
His attorney, whether I agree with it or not, did not want to cooperate at all with us. It hurt our ability to resolve Richard Jewell in a timely manner. It made him a victim. It didn't make us look very good either.
Still tailed by FBI agents and unable to get a job, his only source of income is now a telephone hotline.
2 months after Jewell was identified, he was offered a deal. If he answered investigators' questions, he could be cleared.
Once Richard Jewell did come in, it became very apparent over the next few weeks that there's no reason to charge him.
Hey, all done. Richard Jewell finally got what he's been waiting for.
The thing is, all they would need to do is, because I'm sure in 1996, you could look at his bank history, his transactions, see if he's made any purchases of materials that are typically used in an explosive, any large cash withdrawals, follow the money. If you can't find anything like that, I think you kind of have to clear him unless somebody just happened to give him a bomb. I don't know why it took them so long to clear the guy.
Delivered letter from the Justice Department says, based on the evidence developed to date, Jewell is not considered a target of the federal investigation.
After he was cleared of suspicion, several FBI agents were reprimanded, including the agent who read Jewell his Miranda rights during the ruse. Jewell pursued legal action against several news organizations, citing, among other things, a column that implied a comparison between Jewell and a convicted murderer, and another that called him a fat, failed former sheriff's deputy.
Here's Richard Jewell, the 114th victim of the Atlanta Olympic bombing.
This is the first time I have ever asked you to turn your cameras on me. For 88 days, I lived a nightmare. For 88 days, my mother lived a nightmare too. And it's rushed for the headline that the hero was the bomber. The media cared nothing for my feelings as a human being.
NBC, CNN, and the New York Post were among those which settled for undisclosed sums. But the Atlanta Journal-Constitution fought the case for 15 years and won.
There's no way that anybody can convince me that we libeled Richard Jewell. The information we printed was that he was the focus of the investigation. He was the focus of the investigation.
I mean, it's hard for me to argue with him because I've not read all of the publications that his newspaper released. Maybe they were fair on him, but I do feel like it's unfair to even... Is it unfair to mention that he's under investigation? If he is under investigation? No, I guess not. As long as they don't lie,
Sorry for what happened to Richard Jewell. Yes, I'm sorry for what happened to Richard Jewell, but I don't feel responsible for what happened to him.
This is video that just came into us.
I followed the Boston Marathon case very closely, and I was really struck by how far law enforcement has come, and particularly their use of technology has come.
After a very detailed analysis of photo, video, and other evidence, we are releasing photos of these two suspects. The public will play a critical role in identifying and locating these individuals.
In the Boston case, you wanted to bring the media in at almost every point so that you get out these leads.
Millions across the world saw these photos instantly, tweeted and retweeted, Facebooked and Facebook shared.
But social media also made it easier for the public and the press to quickly spread misinformation and false leads, whether they originated with law enforcement or not.
Crowdsourced investigations turned into a witch hunt. This missing student was wrongfully accused of being a suspect.
In the last 2 years, innocent men have been wrongly associated with a number of high-profile crimes, including mass shootings in Newtown, Connecticut, and the Washington Navy Yard. After the Boston bombing, the New York Post, while not naming these two men as suspects, ran a photo of them at the marathon under the headline, Bagmen.
Being wrongly accused of an act of terrorism is its own kind of nightmare.
This is the thing. A lot of these newspapers, they just want to be the first one to break something, the first one to... And it often leads to misinformation. And usually when they're caught, like, in a mistake, they usually apologize at the back of the newspaper. They don't the next day publish in the front, I'm sorry, we were wrong. It's not fair.
Ask Richard Jewell, who went through the media pile-on.
The obvious lesson learned from Richard Jewell is avoid identifying people as a suspect if there's not really good reason to do so, because it can lead to just what happened in Richard Jewell's case, the identification of someone who not only was innocent, but was a hero.
As it turned out, the true perpetrator of the Olympic bombing remained active. He would go on to bomb 2 abortion clinics and a gay nightclub in the years following Centennial Olympic Park.
The crime scene in Atlanta was a complicated one, to say the least, but we ended up getting a picture of a silhouetted figure on the bench where the bomb was placed. We had the bomber. The problem was the quality was so poor that you could make out no facial features. I can't help but think that if we fast forwarded to today, that we would have had Eric Rudolph's face on there and would have solved that crime quite quickly.
So that's him.
Nearly a decade after the Olympic bombing, Rudolph pled guilty in an Atlanta courthouse. Richard Jewell was there.
He gave me a hug, and I noticed some of my former law enforcement colleagues stepping away because there was still something about it. I think there was a feeling that they didn't want to be associated with Richard Jewell.
Jewell eventually found work.
Madness. They stepped away from him as if he was somehow repulsive to them, like toxic to them, even though they ruined his life. How dare those agents?
Sheriff's deputy in Georgia. He died in 2007 due to complications brought on by diabetes. He was 44 years old.
44.
People to this day think that he was arrested. He was never arrested. He had
44.
nothing to do with it. Is that the implication that you should get from responsible reporting?
There definitely needs to be much, much stricter regulations in place when it comes to naming suspects, when it comes to potentially ruining people's lives just for the sake of selling newspapers. It's not right. It's horrible. You have to think the editors of those newspapers, the editors-in-chief, if it was their son or daughter or family member, would they be so eager to name that person in the story? Definitely not. So apply that same courtesy. Like Richard Jewell, you can't, even up to the point where he died, I'm sure there's people who still kind of look at him a bit shiftily, like, was he really innocent, you know? Even though he, you know, rightfully won the cases when he sued some of those newspapers, money doesn't always buy you, especially 3 months, 88 days of hell, of hounding, of stalking, of following, of tapping his phone calls. Like, that must have been a hellish experience. Thanks for watching, guys, and I'll see you in the next one.